Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and participants. Welcome to this final session of our Quran 14 series. We have spent about, let's say, in excess of, is it 6 weeks or 7 weeks, or maybe even more? And we have been studying various aspects of the Quran. We have been studying the introduction to the Quran. And since the past couple of weeks, I think, or more, I think maybe 5 or 6 weeks, we have been studying the various surahs of the Quran. We started off with the Surah Saff, which is the first surah of the sixth chapter of the Quran. And today I plan to end this series on the two surahs that we are going to study today, inshallah. We are hoping to make a new course for you, inshallah, in the coming weeks, and we'll be back with something new. But for the moment, the purpose was that you are able to have a basic understanding of the history, of the language, of the background, of the genre, and of course the various aspects of the Quranic arrangement and the sequence which is found in its various chapters, and then to demonstrate some of this understanding that you have gained by practical study of the Quranic text. So I'll start off with Surah Saff, which is the 61st surah of the Quran, and it is also one of the Medinan surahs. So you would be remembering that we have been discussing this. That as far as the Medinan surahs are concerned, they always consist in one block. They come together right after the Meccan surahs end. And as far as the sixth chapter is concerned, the Meccan surahs actually ended on the 56th surah, which is Surah Waqia, and from 57th onwards, we are into the Medinan group. And today, the 61st surah, of course, is Surah Saff, which is, again, as I said, is a Medinan surah, and the next surah as well, which is 62nd, Surah Jumu'ah. These are also, this surah is also a Medinan surah, and as I have been explaining all along, that these surahs within each chapter, they occur in pairs. So it's like having a counterpart for each surah. And coincidentally, the two surahs that we are going to study today, Surah Saff and Surah Jumu'ah, both of them are pairs. And when we talk about pairs, it actually means that there is some connection between the two surahs. At times, something which is concisely stated in one surah, it is elaborated in the other surah. So sometimes the arguments which are stated in one surah would be historical typically, and in its counterpart, the same premise would be validated to, for example, arguments drawn from human intuition. So you see, there is this paired relationship, and a very stark paired relationship, which all of you can easily decipher, is, for example, between the last two surahs of the Quran, Surah Falaq and Surah Nas. They're like sisters. So, because of the fact that that relationship is very evident from that example, you can see how, if you study the rest of the Quran, you'll find there are very few exceptions to this paired scheme. Otherwise, all these surahs, they form in pairs within a chapter. So there are 7 chapters of the Quran. Within each chapter, these surahs, they occur in pairs. And then, as I said, that all the Meccan surahs, they are on one. This with them begins the chapter itself, and on the Medinan surahs, the chapter itself ends. Also, we discussed this fact that in all these surahs, basically it's the biography of the Prophet as a prophet, and Prophet Muhammad, the way he uh, went about discharging his duties as the last messenger of God, the various phases of his struggle against his opponents, they are preserved in the Quran in this sequence. So each of these 7 chapters has some, either all or some of these phases mentioned. And the phases which are mentioned within a chapter, they highlight the struggle of the Prophet regarding that phase. So if you are aware of this scheme, that the Quran consists of 7 chapters, each of the chapters has surahs which occur in pairs, and at the same time, all these surahs, wherever they occur, wherever they are placed, they are highlighting some aspect of the Prophet's biography, of the Prophet's preaching endeavor or his preaching efforts. And also, as you would be remembering that we discussed that in the times of messengers of God, this preaching always culminates in a decisive verdict, and that is that the followers of a messenger they always succeed, and those who oppose him vehemently and deliberately they are destroyed. So this is the theme of the Quran as well. That all previous messengers, in their own struggles, in their own preaching periods, they might have passed through extremely difficult times, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who are victorious. And this whole saga, I would say, or this whole journey is preserved in the Quran. And the reason to preserve it is that this is the biggest proof of the hereafter. Because you see, the most significant element of the hereafter is accountability. That accountability shall take place in the next world based on one's actions and deeds. And this accountability took place in the times of every messenger of God. And because it took place, so therefore it keeps us reminding, all of us reminding who are in the post prophetic era when those messengers no longer come, that although our fate has been deferred, but it's not that it's not going to happen. The only thing is the messengers, nations, their fate was decided in this world, and as far as this in the post prophetic era, in the era that we are living, our fate will be judged in the hereafter. So that is the difference. And at the same time, all these incidents which are mentioned in the Quran regarding previous prophets of God, regarding these previous messengers, they consistently and constantly serve to remind us that this is something that all of us need to be aware of. So remember, this is just a one single point agenda which the Quran keeps on repeating for us, that don't forget this day of accountability. So in one word, it's accountability thereafter. That is the key word in the Quran everywhere, and all these surahs they highlight through various examples, through various arguments, this single point. And if you're able to appreciate that, you'll always enjoy reading the Quran because you would know that this is what you're going to find there. It's because you see, when we enter the Quran, we have a lot of presupposed notions about the Quran, and because it's a book of God, we think, well, it should contain every single shred of guidance that we can imagine. And the scheme of the Almighty is entirely different. The scheme of the Almighty is that as far as guidance is concerned, almost 80 to 90% of that guidance is what God has already revealed in our own intuition, in our own conscience. We know what right and wrong are. It's just about 10 or 15% or 20% in which we need some further guidance regarding, for example, worship rituals or regarding some aspects of our social and communal life. Then in those aspects, we are just given some certain guidelines, and that is it. So we have to understand that the Almighty, when He created mankind, He created them with guidance, with our initial guidance, with our innate guidance, and that is largely sufficient for us. But of course, some aspects they need further explanation, and that is where the Quran comes in. So the Quran has to be understood and read in this background. And if it is understood and read in this background, you will expect what to find and where to find, and how it can also bolster your faith, strengthen your faith. Because each time you read the Quran, you find that there is something in the Quran which is as if it is a reflection of your own inner nature. It is a reflection of what you are already thinking. This is how it connects with you, and especially, my dear friends and my dear participants, whenever you get time in your life for this, uh, do consider learning the Arabic language, not the Arabic language per se, but the Quranic Arabic, just the Quranic Arabic, so that one day you are able to read the Quran in Arabic and understand it right away without a translation. Because the way it will affect you and the way it will have an impact on you is unmatched. The original is always the original. So whenever you have time in life and whenever you feel like, do make it a part of your life's commitments that you shall learn Quranic Arabic. It's not a difficult task. It's just a 1 year commitment, maybe an hour a day, and you'll be through with basic Quranic Arabic, and that will be a big thing that you will achieve, inshallah. So let's start off with today's surahs, and As you would be knowing, the surah that we are discussing today, they are these paired surahs, and these paired surahs, as you can see, uh, they just also introduced to you. They are of the Median period, and one thing that might also be interesting to you before we start the study is that remember that as far as these surahs are concerned, both of them they address weak Muslims or Muslims who claimed to be very strong and staunch Muslims, but when the time uh, to honor their commitment with the Prophet for fighting in his cause, for keeping God's word superior came, they would just back away and they were just, it was like a false commitment they had made. So it's basically such weak Muslims bordering on hypocrisy, I would say, they are addressed in both these surahs. Okay, so let's start with the very first, which is Surah Saff. So it says, يُسَبَّحَ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ كَبُرَ مَقْتًا عِندَ اللَّهِ أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ صَفًّا كَأَنَّهُم بُنْيَانٌ مَّرْصُوصٌ.
Assalamu alaikum, participant. Can I request Zoya Bernie, please go ahead and read the translation of this passage?
In the name of God, the most gracious, the ever merciful, every object of the heavens and the earth has glorified God, and He is the mighty, the very wise. Believers, why do you say what you do not do? It is most detestable in God's sight that you should say something which you do not do. God holds dear only those who fight for His cause, as if they are one solid lead-filled wall.
Thank you, Zoya, for this reading. So you see, the surah starts off with the fact that as far as God is concerned, He is an embodiment of perfection and He's mighty and wise. And as a result of this, every object of this universe that He has created, it glorifies Him by its existence and at times by words as well. And you see, the last verse tells us that the initial verses, which was, of course, with which the surah began, what exactly is the contradiction which the Quran is talking about? You see, the Quran is saying that why do you not do what you say? You claim something, but you do not do it. And if you study the last verse, you'll immediately find out what exactly the Quran is saying here. It is saying that God holds dear only those who fight for His cause, as if they are one solid lead-filled wall. So this automatically tells us that there is something which they committed from their words or from their tongues and then never honored when the time came. So they said that, okay, when the time comes to fight with the disbelievers, we will be with you. But when the time actually arose, they would just back away. So you see, you can just see how the words "lima taquluna ma la taf'alun," which means that don't do what you don't. I mean, don't whatever you are saying, you don't practice that. So it is in this context that you say that we'll be with you, O Prophet, when the time of war comes. But when the time actually comes, you back away. So it's like saying something or claiming something to do, but when the time comes, you don't do it. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ لِمَ تُؤْذُونَنِي وَقَدْ تَعْلَمُونَ أَنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْفَاسِقِينَ.
Zoha Nadine, it's your turn.
The Jews also behaved similarly. Recall when Moses said to his people, "People of my nation, why do you torment me by being continuously disobedient? Even though you know very well that I have come to you as a messenger of God." But in spite of this admonition, when they deviated, God made their hearts deviate. God never guides such defiant people.
Thank you, Zoha, for reading out this passage for us. So you see, now historical examples are cited in which people claim something and then they don't go doing about what they claim. And the example given here is, first of all, of Prophet Moses. So they also behaved in a very similar way. And they used to bug the Prophet Moses a lot. They used to harass him. They used to say something and then not honor their commitment. This is a continuous it was a continuous attitude that they had adopted. If you study the history of the Israelites, you'll find that they had really, I mean, done a lot of things which were uh, against what they had committed, and a lot of in a lot of instances. And this is a practice of the Almighty, which He actually has described in a number of instances in the Quran. And that is, when people start doing this, then God also punishes them. So when their hearts deviated, God made them deviate, so that they are not able to accept the truth. So it's like saying that if you do this, then you'll be punished for this further. If you deviate the way you are in spite of this warning that is being sounded to you, then don't think that in future you'll be afforded this chance once again, and God will make your hearts go astray because of this misdemeanor or this wrong attitude. So when and finally it says that God never guides such defiant people, because people who don't obey messengers of God in this way and keep on making commitments and dishonoring them, this is how they would ultimately end up. Okay, so now another example is being mentioned. So the words are, وإذ قال عيسى ابن مريم يا بني إسرائيل إني رسول الله إليكم مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة ومبشرا برسول يأتي من بعد اسمه أحمد فلما جاءهم بالبينات قالوا هذا سحر مبين.
Zara Bernie, please go ahead, read the translation for us.
They continued to show deviation in this manner. Recall when Jesus, son of Mary, said, O Israelites, I am a messenger sent forth to you from God in realization of the predictions which exist before me in the Torah, and a deliverer of glad tidings of a messenger coming after me, whose name will be Ahmed. But when he came to them with clear signs, they said, This is plain magic.
Jazakallah Zara for just reading out this translation. So, after Moses, the next example cited is that of Jesus. And remember, both for Israelites, both for the prophets sent to the Israelites. So, when Jesus said, of course, he's called Jesus, son of Mary. So, when he said that he's a messenger from God, and remember this, what he has just, uttered here right at the time when he was being denied by his followers. He said that I am here not as someone who is unintroduced. I am already introduced in the Torah, because the book that was revealed on Moses hundreds of years before me, it has mentioned my arrival. So I am here in confirmation of the predictions that are found about me in the Torah. So if you read the Torah, you'll find the Prophet John, Yohanna in Arabic, Yahya in Arabic actually. He talked about the arrival of Jesus, and so did some of the earlier prophets of God. So Jesus said that when I have come to you, it's not that you don't know about me, because prophets who have existed before me, they have always prophesied that I'm going to come. And then the second thing, which is also very important, my dear friends and participants, that you need to note here is that he actually predicted the arrival of Prophet Muhammad by his name. And his name is Ahmad. So remember, Prophet Muhammad's real name is Ahmad. Muhammad is his laqab, which is like an honorific title. So basically, his name is Ahmad. And the Quran tells us that Jesus actually predicted the arrival of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ by his name, which is Ahmad. So even today, if you look up the Bibles, the Injils, I would say the Gospels, you'll find his name, although not mentioned exactly in this word, in this word Ahmad, but by his attributes, which are very close to the word Ahmad. And you'll realize that unfortunately, this is one area in which the scholars of the Jews, they tampered with the Torah and with the Injil, so as to obliterate his name and to delete his name. But you'll find that there are so many quotations from within the Bible. Maybe you can look up some of the exegesis of the Quran under this verse, and you'll find those verses from the Bible, how closely they depict the arrival of Prophet Muhammad. And for example, there is one quote from the Gospel of John, which says that let me go, because unless I go, this is Jesus telling his people that let me go, unless I go, the counselor of the world is not going to come, and he's going to come after me, and then he's going to stay with them forever. So you see, words like these are so clear, which they interpret in their own terminology to be at times someone else, or at times towards the second arrival of the second coming of Jesus. But the way it is mentioned that let me go because the person who's going to stay till the end of the world, he's not going to come unless I go, clearly can only refer to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you'll find numerous other quotations as well. But look what happened. It says, when he came to them with clear signs, they said, this is plain magic. So what they did with Moses was the same. I mean, it was no different in the case of Jesus as well. So just as they did try to deny Moses, they tried to disobey him, they remained as defiant people, always asking for miracles. And you can see there from their history how this defiance and disobedience had arisen to such an extent that the Quran had to, the Quran actually said at one place, "La takunu kallazina azaw Musa," which means don't be like people who really put Moses into a lot of bother and they harassed Moses. So it's like Quran telling Muslims that don't behave in the same way with your own prophet as these Jews did with their prophet. So with Prophet Moses and Prophet Jesus, this is how they behaved. And when, as this verse says, and when he came to them, they just said, "Well, this is plain magic. We don't believe you." So it was like a dismissal in a way that could convince their own followers and people that, well, if they are not believing in Jesus, it's merely because he's just showing or weaving a spell of magic. It's nothing real. Okay, so ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله الكذب وهو يدعى إلى الإسلام والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون.
Umar, may I request you to read the translation?
They are still persisting with this deviation. Speak up. Who can be more unjust than the person who fabricates a falsehood about God even though he is being called to Islam? In reality, God does not guide such wrongdoers. They want to extinguish the light of God with the blows of their mouths, and God has decided that he will perfect his light. However much these disbelievers may dislike it, it is he who has sent forth his messenger with guidance and the true religion so that he may make it prevail over all religions of this land, however much these idolaters may dislike it.
So thank you, Umar, for reading this out for us. So now comes the point in which we are in history. We have reached the point when Prophet Muhammad had arrived on the scene. So it was said that just as his predecessors, they were actually not given the right attitude. They were not properly obeyed, and this attitude is still continuing, and they're persisting with this. And if this is the case, then of course, how can God guide such people? And the intent of such people is that this new guidance, which is brought by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they want to extinguish the light of this guidance, which of course means that they just want to disobey it as well. But they forget that God has sent his messenger with a mission, and that mission is that he is going to make that religion prevail in the land of Arabia. So remember, this is for the land of Arabia. It was destined that amongst the religion of the idolaters, which was of course idolatry and polytheism, and of course the Jews and the Christians who were following their own traditions, and they were incriminated with all kinds of idolatry as well, because the Jews of Arabia, they would regard Uzair or Azra to be the son of God, and the Christians of Arabia would regard Jesus to be son of God. So they were also incriminated with some forms of idolatry or polytheism. So it is in the background of this that they are being told that because of the arrival of the last messenger of God, once again, that practice of God, which I just referred to you before we began studying the surah, that God always makes his messengers dominate, and he always gives a verdict in their favor, and they are the ones who ultimately prevail. So this is what they are being told, that if they persist with the same attitude which their predecessors persisted with regarding Moses and Jesus, then you will you'll not be met with a different fate. You'll meet the same fate because this is how God is going to treat such people. Okay, يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ذلك الفوز العظيم وأخرى تحبونها نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين.
Senu, it's your turn. Please go ahead and read the translation for us.
Believer, shall I tell you of a deal which will save you from a woeful scourge? Contrary to the attitude of the Jews, you should profess faith in God and in His messenger. The way this should be done and should wage war for the cause of God through your wealth and your persons. This is better for you if you understand it. If you understand, as its reward, God will forgive your sins and admit you to gardens below, which streams flow and bless you with the best house, which will be in the gardens of eternity. This is supreme success, and will also give you another thing which you desire, help from God and a victory in the near future. Give glad tidings of this to the believers, O Prophet.
Thank you, Sanur, for this reading. And you can now see that these followers of Prophet Muhammad, they are actually being urged that do not adopt the same way as the Jews and the Christians did so regarding their own prophets, especially the Israelite prophets. So, therefore, when the time comes for you to honor your word and what we just mentioned in this at the start of the surah, that there is always a time in most messengers of God, in the case of most messengers of God, that they have to launch a struggle with these disbelievers. In the times of the previous messengers, this seldom took place because they were destroyed through natural calamities, like, for example, earthquakes and cyclones and tempestuous winds and storms. But in the case of Prophet Muhammad, this destruction was destined to happen to the hands of the believers. So for this, they had to wage war. Although this war never took place because all of Arabia actually accepted faith, and so therefore only a few people were put to death or punished, and they were the ones who had committed high treason at times or were guilty of of even plotting to murder the prophet. So some of them were put to death. I mean, if you count them, you can count them on your fingers. But since the rest of them actually professed faith, so therefore they were spared. And this is what they are being told, that if you do this, then be sure that God is going to help you, and this is going to be supreme success as well. And don't forget that even in this world, you'll be given this victory that actually materialized later on in the form of the conquest of Mecca, which is called Fathun Qarib in this in the surah. And as you can see, that these are glad tidings, or they are predictions basically of a future event. So, like the Prophet, the believers also need assurances, and this is how God actually assures them by telling them how they will be admitted into paradise in the next world, and in this world as well, they'll triumph. Because as far as prophets of God are concerned, the messengers among them, they are destined to triumph along with their followers in this world as well. Okay, so يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل وكفرت طائفة فأيدنا الذين آمنوا على عدوهم فأصبحوا ظاهرين.
Sene, it's your turn.
Believers, be God's helpers the way Jesus, son of Mary, said to the disciples, "Who will be my helper in the cause of God?" The disciples replied, "We are God's helpers." Consequently, one group from among the Israelites professed faith, while another became adamant on disbelief. Then we helped the believers against their enemies, so they triumphed over them.
Thank you, Sine. So you see here the example of Jesus is given, that when he actually got totally frustrated. He turned to his disciples and he said that, well, if you are going to follow me and we are going to preach, of course, in the streets of our city and tell people to come to the cause of God, then I would require your help. And this is an appeal which Jesus made to his followers who are called the Ansar. Ansar, of course, is a plural of Nasir, and Nasir means a helper. So they are called the helpers of God. And basically, these disciples, they proved so. So an example of these disciples is being cited before Muslims, and they are being told that just as they followed Jesus and when he called for their help, you too should say the same words and get up and follow the Prophet and take part in the struggle. So as far as the Israelites were concerned, so it says that the large group actually became adamant on disbelief, which means that they denied Jesus. And in spite of that, God says, فَأَيَّدْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا عَلَىٰ عَدُوِّهِمْ, that we help the believers against their enemies. So later on, the ultimate triumph was of the believers. Of course, here the word believer refers to the believers of Jesus. And so they triumphed over his deniers or his rejectors. So there was one group who rejected him and another group who accepted him. So the ones who accepted him, they were made to dominate the ones who rejected him. So this is how the surah ends, and you can clearly see that the surah, through historical examples, is citing this fact to Muslims, especially the weak Muslims who stake claim to faith, but when the time comes to test their faith, they just draw away, and they are being given these examples of the past prophets, how similarly they behaved, and how ultimately, when Jesus got disappointed, he actually turned to his students, his disciples, and asked for his help, and they did lend their help for this. And once they did, فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ, so they triumphed over their enemies, and this is how God's plan always is. Now we come to its paired surah, which is Surah Jumu'ah. As I said, it's a counterpart of this surah, and it starts off with يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم.
Fine. Please go ahead and read the translation.
All that is in the heavens and the earth glorifies God, the King, the Holy, the Mighty, the Wise. It is He who brought forth among the unlettered a messenger from among them, who recites to them His revelations and purifies them, and for this instructs them in the law and in wisdom. In reality, these people were in manifest error before this, and among the unlettered others also who after embracing faith have yet to join them. God is the mighty, the wise one. This is the favor of God. He bestows it on whomsoever he intends, and great is God's favor.
Jazakallah Saim for reading this passage out for us. So you see that the surah starts off in a very similar way as the previous surah began, which is glorification of God, the King, the Holy, the Mighty, and the Wise. We had a very similar verse in the previous surah as well. And now you can see in the next paragraph, the advent of Prophet Muhammad is described. And one particular word that you'll find being used over and over again in the Quran for the tribe or for the family or for the clan of the Prophet is Ummiyin. Ummiyin means someone who are not aware of religious details of religion. And we know that before Prophet Muhammad, amongst the Ishmaelites, amongst the followers of Abraham, who descended from his son Ishmael, there was no prophet after Prophet Ishmael. So for almost 2,500 years, you can see this branch or this progeny of Abraham had no prophet coming to them, whereas in the other branch, which started from Isaac, the other son of Prophet Abraham, we find a continuous stream of prophets coming right up till Prophet Jesus. So after him, of course, the next prophet who came was amongst the Ishmaelites, which of course descended from Abraham's son Ishmael. So they are called unlettered because they in this long period of time had simply lost the teachings of Abraham and Ishmael. And although they were still followers of Abraham and Ishmael through some oral traditions that is still preserved, but by and large they had succumbed to idolatry and polytheism. And for precisely this reason, God said that, okay, now the last and final prophet is going to come to you, and his purpose, as you can clearly see, is outlined in one word, and that is yuzakkihim, which means that he purifies them. Now, purification is a word of the Quran, my dear participants and friends, which has a very special significance. It means that to cleanse our deeds and our beliefs from evil, from everything which is wrong. So, purifying our deeds and purifying our beliefs is the purpose of religion. And this is what prophets of God do. And for this, the purpose, to achieve this purpose, they instruct people in law and wisdom, which in other words means that the components of religion are law and wisdom, al-hikmah and al-kitab. Al-kitab stands for law and al-hikmah stands for wisdom. And law, of course, means the Sharia, which refers to a set of rules that we follow in conducting our affairs. And al-hikmah basically relates to morality and faith. So they form the crux and they are the basis of religion. So the experts, the preserves of morality, I would say, and the basics of faith, they are spelled out. So these are the two components of religion which prophets of God have always preached, law and wisdom. And this whole episode is presented in the Quran as a favor done by God, which says, "Nalika fazlullahi yu'tihi man yasha." It's a great favor by God done to the Ishmaelites or the unlettered because of the fact that since a long time no messenger had come to them, and this is what God's plan was, that ultimately the final messenger on whom the whole institution of prophethood and messenger would be terminated would actually come from the Ishmaelites, which are the cousins of the Israelites. Okay, so the next is another example that you will see as we read the translation. The Arabic text is مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلُوا التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون.
Rayan, it's your turn. Please go ahead.
What right have the Jews to object to this? The example of those who were entrusted with the burden of the Torah, then did not bear it, is like that of a donkey laden with books. What an evil example of a people who has denied God's revelations. These are the unjust, and God does not guide such unjust people. Tell them, O people who have become Jews, if you think that you are dearer to God than others, then you should wish for death if you are truthful. But they will never be desirous of death because of the misdeeds they have sent forward. God knows well these unjust people. Tell them, the death from which you are running away is sure to come to you. Then you will be made to appear before him who knows the hidden and the manifest, and he will inform you what you have been doing.
Thank you, Rayan. So you see, from the very text, it becomes evident that the Jews had objected at why has the final prophet come amongst the Ishmaelites, and why is it that it has not come from their own lineage? And they are being told that what right have you to object? Because when you were given your own book, which is the Torah, you never actually followed the book, and it was like carrying the book like the way animals carry something, and they are not even aware of what they are carrying. So they are basically given this example that just as a donkey, the donkeys and mules were used in those times, and as is the case in these times as well, for carrying various burdens and various things and transporting them. So the example is given that if your own situation is no different, what right have you to object that now a new prophet is coming from their cousins and not from their own self? Because when someone came from among you, referring of course to Moses, you behaved no differently. You never followed the Torah, and therefore this is something that you must always keep in mind. And one thing that you can clearly see is that they regard themselves to be the chosen ummah. So they thought that they have been salvaged already because they have professed belief in the prophets of God. They are the selected people of God. So they are told that if you think that you're God's chosen people, then why don't you prefer death? Why don't you call for death or pray for death? Because if you are chosen, it's something that will persist in the next world as well. And you should not be afraid of the next world, other than these Ishmaelites. But the Quran tells us that because of the fact that they have done these evil deeds, they will never wish for death, in spite of the fact that they would not like to die. So the reason being that the evil that they have done and sent forward would be there, would be awaiting them, and that would of course entail punishment. So therefore, this is not going to happen. And it finally says, the Quran finally says that the death that you are trying to escape from, because they wanted to escape death, in fact, and they wanted to, as you can see from other instances in the Quran, they wanted to live forever, or they wanted to be given a large or long span of life, and they are told that whatever lifespan they have, ultimately, come what may, you are bound to meet God. فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ. You are going to die, and then you will be returned to the person, of course, referring to God, who knows the hidden and the manifest, and He will tell you what you have been doing. So don't fool other people by saying these words. You are desirous of life. You don't want to wish death, in spite of the fact that you think yourselves to be the chosen people of God. And for chosen people, the problem of dying should not be of any bother, because if you are chosen, God is going to deal with you in a very affectionate way in the hereafter as well. But the fact is that they know what their fate is going to be because of what they have done in this world. This is like God exposing their inner selves. Okay, now we come to the final paragraph of this surah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين.
Raheel, may I request you, please go ahead and read the translation of these verses.
Believers, give due importance to the Prophet, and when the call for prayer is sounded on Friday on his behalf, with diligence to go to the remembrance of God and leave aside your trading. This is better for you if you but know. Then when the prayer ends, disperse in the land and seek God's bounty and remember God in abundance so that you may succeed. Such are these people that when they see some trading or merriment, they flock eagerly to it and leave you standing. Tell them, that which God has in store is far better than any merriment or trade, and in reality, God is the best provider.
Jazakallah, and thank you, Raheel, for reading out this passage, which is the concluding passage of the surah as well. So now the discourse shifts towards Prophet Muhammad and the believers. Again, as I said, that this surah basically addresses the weak Muslims, or the weak Muslims who were bordering on hypocrisy. And they are being told that just as your predecessors, the nations of Jesus and Moses, they did not give importance to their own prophets, and that they continue to harass them and they continue to taunt them as well. You should not behave in a similar manner, because this is how nations get destroyed, when they start disrespecting their prophets and disrespecting the guidance which is brought to them. And an example here is actually cited in the times of Prophet Muhammad in Medina, when he was delivering the Friday sermon and was about to lead the Friday prayer. It does seem that there was a caravan which had arrived in Medina with a lot of merchandise and goods. And these people who were actually in the mosque just behind the Prophet some of these weak Muslims, they actually scuttled out from the presence of the Prophet, and they started to buy that merchandise which had come from different cities. So this is something which is unbecoming. It's a wrong attitude that you adopt in the presence of a Prophet of God who's delivering a sermon. They are being told that this shows that how little importance you give to God's remembrance, especially when this is being delivered by no other person than the messenger himself, and that to the messenger of God. So they are being told that remember, this is a form of hypocrisy, and this is something that you must realize should not happen in your ranks, because today the Prophet is amongst them, tomorrow he might not be there for them, and if they are behaving like this in his presence, no wonder what they will behave when he passes away. So it's something that you have to pay attention. And although trading and everything is perfectly okay, but if there is a clash between these worldly needs and the needs of the hereafter, then remember you have to give preference to the hereafter, because come what may, Wallahu khairur raziqeen, in reality, God is the best provider. He is the one who is going to sustain you. He is the one who is going to provide for you. So therefore, don't think that if that is going to happen today, that some caravan has come and brought some goods, then this is something which will not happen again, because God has planned all this as His last messenger would soon depart from them, and they would be required to carry on His legacy. So they have to be totally prepared for this and not behave like their predecessors. So you see, my dear friends and participants, how the two surahs complement each other. How in the first surah the behavior of these Jews and Christians, or I would say the Israelites to be precise, has been compared, and how Muslims are being told that they should not adopt the same attitude as these people of the previous prophets, because this is what led them to doom. And if they adopt the same, then it will lead them to doom as well. So this shows the connectivity, how close these two surahs are connected, and at the same time, it also sheds light on one of the events which had taken place. Remember, in the Medinan surahs, the phase which we are passing through while we're studying these two surahs is the one in which basically what happens is that the believers are being prepared to launch that final onslaught in case need arises against the disbelievers, which, as I said, in the case of the previous nations, took the form and shape of various cyclones and storms in which they were destroyed. But in this case, believers were destined and they were being prepared to launch this onslaught. As I said, this never came because all of Arabia actually accepted faith. And as you will move along, inshallah, in future when we study the text of the Quran sometime again, you'll see how gradually these chapters bring to an end this whole preaching mission, I would say, or preaching struggle of Prophet Muhammad, and how it describes his ministry in this way. So, thank you very much. This brings us to an end to this course as well. We have, if I remember correctly, this is our 32nd session. So it's 32 weeks for all of you to be here with me at this time. And I often think that this is one of the best times to perhaps relax, but all of you gave up your relaxation to study the Quran. May God reward you for that. And inshallah, we do plan that in future that we come up with some new readings from the Quran in slightly different styles and some modified ways to make this text even more interesting to you. So at the same time, if you have any feedback, anything that you'd like us to add to this study maybe in the future, or some topic that you might suggest, that also would be very welcome. And a special note of thanks, of course, to all of you who have made my day, as I would say. And it gives me great pleasure that we are closing this course in the month of Ramadan, which is departing very soon from us. And I do pray that we are able to reap the blessings of this month as far as we are able to in these closing days. And one thing I would say, which we can learn as a lesson regarding this whole course, is that, and of course from this month of Ramadan as well, is that remember the fasts that we keep in this month of Ramadan are meant to commemorate the revelation of the Quran. So we are fasting in the month of Ramadan because it was in the month of Ramadan that the Quran was revealed. So the Quran has such an important place in our lives, that we fast for as a token of gratitude for its revelation. So my advice to you and my suggestion to you would be that do keep a Quran translation handy at your bedside. Do give some time every day, maybe 10 minutes or even 5 minutes. But just as you don't miss any meal, you don't miss any particular thing that you have set up for yourself in a day. One thing which is important is fix one time, and whether it's 5 minutes or 3 minutes, don't ever spend any day which is without reading any part, even if it's a single verse of the Quran. One verse of the Quran with the translation, that is a minimum. Even if you can maintain that, just pick up the Quran and pick up one verse and read it with translation. And of course, if there's a question that you have on that translation, you can always look up and discuss. But if you make this a habit, that study one verse of the Quran every day, a minimum of one verse. If you can do more, well and good. But don't miss out, even on a holiday. A verse a day is something that should be a target of your life forever, because you'll find out how it's going to affect your lives, how you'll feel spiritually elevated, how you'll feel connected to God, and something that we always cherish and look forward to. And inshallah, once you're through with the reading of the Quran, and inshallah, if we are there for you and I'm living, maybe we can one day also study the Bible and the previous scriptures as well. Because remember, the Quran is the final word of God, and we have some previous scriptures which are equally, if not, we don't have them in their original language, but they're worth reading because we need to profess faith in them. So, inshallah, you never know. One day we read the Bible as well. But much before that, please do make it a habit that the Quran forms an essential part of your lives every day. And also, if there is anything that you'd like to say at this moment, or any sentiments that you'd like to express, or any suggestions, as I said, you'd like to give, you're most welcome before we sign off.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. We are truly, truly blessed to have you as a teacher among us. Your time, your efforts, your dedication is it's so valuable, and it really means us to a lot. I just want to request you, if you have your gallery view on, we have some participants who want to share something with you, and I can see some raised hands as well.
Okay. Oh my God. I can see. I think I'm seeing most of you for the first time. Thank you very much. Oh wow. I think I need to thank you for being here. You don't need to thank me. It's actually I thank you, because, as I said, coming at this time, and that too on a Sunday. It's very cruel of me to call you at this time, but you come at this time, and of course, there are so many things that you might be doing, and you leave those things. So it's something that really makes us all happy. And thank you very much for that. And inshallah, we'll try and put together something which is more beneficial, and it's more comprehensible for our young minds. And if they have been able to obtain that frequency, that comfort level with the Quran, then I think this is something that I would be really happy, and I really feel happy about it. That something that we have been able to achieve. Inshallah, we'll do something even deeper than this in the coming weeks. So let's sign off, my dear friends and participants, and inshallah we'll see each other after Ramadan some weeks from now. And until then, it is Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye. Have a nice Ramadan and have a nice Eid. So Eid Mubarak to all of you.